Hi, welcome to Open Door Initiative. This is a segment of On Purpose Planning and Consulting. I'm your host, Coach Joanie. This initiative was born out of the need for societal change. And I wanted to do that by bringing together different perspectives. The ability for you all to ask, seek, and knock on that door to lasting reform, where we're here to talk about being open to hear, open to learn, open to educate, and open to share practical steps forward. So today I have a great leader from a brand new business. She's actually going to talk about it, called Axiom Incorporated. I want to make sure I say it correctly. Yes. So as we hop right in, Miss Michelle, tell us who you are, and also we'll have her other leader that works with her as well in her company talk with us, Mr. Daniel Shaffer. So tell us about your company. Tell us what it is that you do, who you are, and what that looks like.
Okay, well, my name is Michelle Chen. I am the proud founder of the Axiom Advancement Corporation. We are located in Pittsburgh's historic Hill District, and basically we are on a mission to intentionally serve minority and women-owned businesses in Pittsburgh. I guess it came to light a few years back. We opened officially in April of this year, but it has been a long time coming. And it's been a journey, but it's been a great one. And what's most noteworthy is Joanie joined me on the journey 2 years ago. So that has been phenomenal. I am a proud client of Miss Joanie Bob, and love you to death. And I thank you for this opportunity.
Of course.
Would you like me to go further into what we do?
We will in just a second. I just want Daniel to hop on real quick. Let us know who you are, what it is that you do within the company, and just a little bit about yourself in general.
Yeah, sure. So again, thank you for the opportunity, of course. A little background on myself. So I have been doing, grant writing and nonprofit consulting by myself here for just under 2 years. I think November rather will be 2 years. I guess I met Michelle, that was this year. It feels like last year. That was in, I believe, early January this year. We met and started kind of talking about what work I do, and then how that could tie in possibly with Axiom, this new idea at the time. And so, we realized that Axiom, I guess as a for-profit, didn't necessarily have the same need as a nonprofit when it comes to grants. However, we found that, of course, the same mentality when it comes to development is necessary. So I've kind of shifted a little bit from grant writing to kind of more of that consulting end. So I'm officially the grants manager for Axiom, but it's a little bit of all the above for right now, of course.
Yeah.
That's kind of, that's my work there. Connecting Axiom or connecting Michelle to people and kind of seeing where things go.
Awesome. And I know you were actually getting right into it, Michelle. That was going to be one of my first questions is, what made you even want to create a company like this?
Okay, so it all started when I worked at the University of Pittsburgh. I had the opportunity to support a joint initiative between the University of Pittsburgh and Carnegie Mellon University. And basically, it was actually called Power Up. It was an initiative that was to foster relationships between emerging companies, entrepreneurs with other experts in the field. And so we married them, and they received mentorship. And I had the fun work of helping them to create their advertising, little commercials and things like that. So I got to know them on a really personal level. And it was so fulfilling to me to see them joined with their mentors. And I really learned the impact that small businesses can have on the communities that they serve, just the economic value that that has. And I was further intrigued. And usually when it's the path that you're supposed to be on, you kind of get more breadcrumbs and more breadcrumbs. And so when it was time for me to move from the University of Pittsburgh, I'm just minding my own business. Someone reaches out to me and says, I have a lead on a job for you, and I think you could do this in your sleep, and I want you to apply. Now, I hadn't even shared with that person that I was leaving Pitt.
Yeah.
It's just so amazing how everything was aligned. So I went and I applied, and the rest is history. I began working for a community development financial institution. For short, it's a CDFI. And I learned so much. I was there as the asset manager, but I wore several hats, as is customary with nonprofits. So I did fundraising, I did annual projects, I managed our audit. I just did it all, in addition to managing risk and the loan portfolio. So it was great. But in that position, again, my roles started changing.
Yeah.
I started having one-on-ones with the small business owners that we serve. And during my time there, I just saw a need. I guess there was a gap there that I felt like needed to be filled. And one thing led to another. And I said, I might have to take a leap of faith here.
Yeah.
I did so. And in April of 2019, I moved ahead, established Axiom officially. We put the board together and went on our journey to find funding. And we were successful in doing so in November of 2019. And so to fast forward now, I'm happy to report that we are in fact ready to go and in a position where now we can provide funding to small businesses through our credit builder loan program. And that is where we report on those payments. And so that helps to build the business owner's personal and business credit profile. And we're also in position to provide some grants. That is absolutely new. I'm over the moon about it. Because there are so many vulnerable businesses that need help now. And to just go back a little bit, the need that I saw was that many women and minority-owned businesses, they didn't have access to the information that their counterparts had. And in fact, there were many times when they would approach commercial banks for funding. And it didn't matter the amount, but they weren't successful in receiving that funding. And so, when you're dealing with a certain demographic, you have to take the whole picture.
Yeah.
They are not just their FICO score. They are not just what we see on that credit report. And so we are making it our mission to see that person and that business as a whole and see where they're going and to lock arms with them to help them to make it to that destination. So we're excited to be in this space. We're excited to help these vulnerable businesses during COVID in whatever way we can. We provide technical assistance. If you don't have certain financials, we are poised to help you to get those, and in addition to the capital that we'll be lending.
That's amazing. That's exactly, especially in our climate now, with minorities having the trouble to be able to get on board with someone who's able to help them and walk them through the actual process of starting their small businesses and then being sustainable and being able to get the tools they need in order to be successful. Daniel, tell me a little bit about even what drew you to Axiom. I know my listeners can't see, but you look different than we do. So I want to talk through, what is that? So, this, like she said, this is heavily kind of geared towards, minorities and yourself being a white male. How do you feel working in an environment, reaching out to communities that look different than you? Like, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, for starters, everything that Michelle said is, in a nutshell, that's what drew me. But
Okay.
no.
Awesome.
So my background as far as here in Pittsburgh, so I did a service year, the Pittsburgh Urban Leadership Service Experience, Pulse Pittsburgh, kind of a shameless plug. I did a service year for them, and my placement, you're placed at a nonprofit for 11 months, and my placement was in the Hill District. So I was actually placed at the Hill Community Development Corporation. And then I was living over in, Perry South, kind of like halfway up the hill on the north side there. Okay. And so I'm not from Pittsburgh. I'm from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is very conservative, very white. And so kind of moving out here to Pittsburgh, literally had been to Pittsburgh for 3 hours total before moving out here. So just kind of made that jump. And then it's one thing to go from kind of, Amish country, Lancaster County to then, the big small city of Pittsburgh.
Right.
But, and then moving into the north side, up in Perry South, which I'm not 100% sure the demographics there. But I mean, the street I was on, pretty sure we were the only white people in the neighborhood, or on that street at least.
Yeah.
And then of course serving in the Hill District, pretty much exact same thing. And so it was kind of, Michelle and I could probably talk about this stuff forever. It was kind of the, I guess initially, a little bit like that shock factor, because you're like, wow, okay, there are people who live differently than you do. Right. You don't really think about it. But it's like, you can't really, like you said, people can't maybe see, but you can, it's that much obvious when you're there in person. It's just a very different mentality. And it removes that distance, I think.
Yeah.
From kind of that us versus them concept, where when you're literally on the ground. So that being said, so I finished out my Pulse service year there, in the Hill District. And I kind of got in the loop with a bunch of different groups, of course, because, the work I was doing was around actually small business. They have a small business program there at the Hill CDC. So I was helping kind of facilitate that sometimes, kind of plan it, coordinate a little bit, eventually getting kind of lumped into the unofficial grant writer. But anyways, when I was done, I started reaching out and kind of trying to do my own grant writing, self-employed gig at first. And I kind of had this moment, I guess around like Thanksgiving or so, 2018, where, it's like, well, wait a minute, why am I only doing this for one group when I know of at least 3 other organizations at, that smaller kind of grassroots stage that could use support. It might not be grant writing, but capacity in any, in any capacity would be helpful. And so I started reaching out, kind of talking to more people, and I realized that it's kind of like fell into that niche. And I'm totally okay with that niche. Yeah. The more I started kind of doing my research, figuring out how I wanted to run my business for myself, and kind of what I wanted that to look like, both, internally and then externally, I realized that I was kind of in this weird, unique position where, I think how to word that, where really, I mean, I could take then that privilege that I had and leverage it, and not for myself, but leverage it for the people I work with.
For others, yeah.
And I've told Michelle, I don't know, maybe a month ago now, there was a client who literally the first time I ever met them, or in their office, I guess, we're talking about, going through the contract details and everything, and it's not nothing too crazy, but at one point, my one client said, we've had a development person here in years before, but they weren't white. Maybe they'll listen to you. And I just kind of shook my head, and and my client's like, I think we'll get along based on your reaction there. And I was like, yeah, I said, nope, I get what you mean. Like, I get it. I hate that that's a thing, but I get it.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, you know, when I got paired or introduced there with Michelle back in January,
Mm-hmm.
you know, she started talking about what she wanted to do at Axiom. And I'm just, you know, I'm like, I'm drafting a contract. I'm like, sign me up already. Like, it's like, yes, this is exactly what I've been saying. I just don't have, you know, I'm not from Pittsburgh. I'm not from the Hill District. I'm not going to be that guy who steps into a Hill District equivalent and saying, here's what needs to happen.
Right.
It's like, that's not my, not my place at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, not my place at all, but I'll gladly help the people who can, you know, have that, you know, that force and movement behind them.
Okay. Michelle, I saw you wanted to chime in.
I think the feeling was mutual. I pretty much, once I realized that, you know, passion is something, and mission and purpose is something that can connect you, and it doesn't matter what color you are, what race you are. I think we just connected through that conversation, and we kind of knew. We didn't know exactly how he would support Axiom, and it still continues to evolve. But, you know, it has been wonderful having him function in a business development arena, as well as, you know, writing the grants, etc. So it's a wonderful thing. And just like in fighting racism, it's more than one race to make a difference.
Yep.
You need the buy-in of everyone.
Yeah.
And so it's a beautiful thing. I love the tapestry that we're creating at Axiom right now.
Awesome. Yeah, that's so good. And that was actually what I was getting ready to even lead into, is that based on what's happening in our country right now with COVID, with the fight for social justice, how has that affected the business? How has that changed even the way that maybe you're reaching out, the way you're connecting with clientele, even the way you're connecting with, you know, Daniel, you spoke about, you know, reaching and networking with other officials and folks like that, you know, to get funding and such. Like, how has that changed how you all are doing business?
So for me, I've been fortunate enough to work remotely. And what that did was allow me time to kind of focus on these vulnerable businesses and how they're faring. And so in speaking with many of them, they were not quite prepared to pivot to, you know, selling online or becoming digitized, so to speak. And so they were behind the curve. And I can tell you, it's been a little bit disheartening, because, you know, I've been talking with some of them through the guidelines of applying for certain COVID relief funding with the SBA, et cetera, and many of them have been unsuccessful. And it has been a hard thing, because now they're closed. Need funding to reopen, and they need funding to even reopen and implement COVID precautions. You know, there's so many other things that they have to do. Some people have to buy a whole new filtration system. They have to buy more chemicals to sanitize, and it has been very difficult. You can't do that. You can't pivot without those resources. And so it's been unfortunate that the most vulnerable have not been successful in receiving the funding. And Daniel, oh, I'm sorry, you had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Daniel, did you want to speak on that at all?
Sure. I mean, your end, I think, is more around for-profit, you know, the business that would come to Axiom, whereas, you know, that kind of covers that, what I was going to say there. But I guess for my end then, I guess outside of Axiom, even the nonprofit side, you know, a lot of the clients I work with are small, minority or women or both owned or led nonprofits, or kind of that grassroots stage, or there's at least one that's not quite grassroots yet. They're getting there. But so a lot of those clients are, of course, smaller. And it kind of is this weird vicious cycle where, you have this group, let's just say they want to do, an after school program. They go to a funder and they say, hey, we want to do this program. It'll cost, let's say, $15,000. The first request you do is probably not going to be the full 15 to say, hey, we want you to pay for our entire program. And so let's say you ask for like 10. Well, a lot of times the response you get back from different foundations, banks, etc., if you get a response at all, is, well, we like your idea, but, can you come back to us when you have more, a track record with that program? And it's just this endless cycle because you're like, well, we can't do the program because we don't have 15 grand in our pocket to just spend on this. We have families, we have friends, we have lives that we want to live. And so one of the things that I've been pushing for, I haven't gotten too far, unfortunately. I don't have the pull behind me yet.
That's right.
I've been pushing for on my LinkedIn and everything is, I'm like, look, there's this huge disconnect between the, I'll still say minority and women owned MWVE. It's, for profit, but the same on the nonprofit side. There's this huge disconnect between minority or women led or owned nonprofits and the philanthropic community. It's kind of like that weird, if you're in, you're in. And if you're not, good luck. And I think that's ridiculous. It's that whole, what is that? Judging the different animals, how they can climb a tree. And it's like, well, the fish is pretty bad at this, so you're not good at climbing. It's like, well, you're setting them up to fail. So I've been pushing and trying. And so, basically everything that Michelle has said applies to the nonprofits. Unfortunately, just for an example, back in April would have been, back in April, the Poise Foundation made a new program that was specifically for Black-owned, both small businesses and nonprofits. And I'm like, for me, I'm like, that's been, I literally told them in a couple emails, I had multiple clients apply, and I literally told them, thank you. I'm like, this is exactly what I've been trying to say. Like, there needs to be a few grants. I'm not saying everything needs to flip or anything crazy, but there needs to be a few grants, funders, programs, whatever they are, specifically for this group. Like this group, if they don't have an in somewhere, they don't get in. They just don't. And so I've been trying to kind of push for that. But yeah, the programs, the funding itself has been difficult. The clients I have, of course, are definitely not prepared in some cases for that pivot, like Michelle mentioned, the digitizing. And so a lot of the work that I've been doing with them, at least, is kind of like, okay, here's where we're at. Who knows when COVID is going away? So let's try to take this brief time where we're all working from home to kind of reorganize, kind of regroup. It's like, where do we want to be in 6 months? Where do we want to be this time next year if COVID is still around? Like, we need to figure that out and kind of literally sit down and, we'll have however many calls it takes to plan something. And so so the funding has been a little tricky. And then on top of that, I wanted to add something else I was trying to get at. So one of the things I've also been kind of pushing is, kind of not necessarily looking at the traditional routes. So not necessarily if you're a nonprofit going for grants or loans in some cases, but instead take that opportunity, like I said, to kind of slow down a little bit and look at some kind of non-traditional methods, and kind of see what opportunity might be there for, a merger, a partnership, kind of see what things are out there, because there's a good chance that there's 6 other nonprofits or at least individuals that are in the same boat, and they might be looking for anything, something to help them kind of stabilize. So I'm all for trying to, merge if we can, and then kind of build the capacity of those smaller nonprofits.
Right, Daniel is true to partnerships. He's very big on them.
Yeah, for sure.
He must have played well in the sandbox when he was little.
How can we do this together?
Right. He's very big on that. I would also like to report, unfortunately, that this time of COVID, the pandemic, the shutdown, has really shown that we do not, in fact, have a great network for the entrepreneurs and small businesses. And it is unfortunate because there was such a disconnect. Some people received information, others did not. Sometimes some banks were scrambling to say, who's in your network? I received so many calls. Who's in your network? Please refer them. We'd like to help them, all of that stuff. But how do we contact them? They've closed down. How do we reach them? They don't have an online presence. So what that has caused me to do now is to start the creation of that. And so I would like to see, and it doesn't have to just be Axiom. I'd like buy-in of other organizations who care about the community, but I'd like for us to have a dedicated place where they can come to get information on different resources, not just funding, because that, wow, that was exposed during this time. Another thing that I found was that the hand-holding that I've always spoken of, that a lot of these businesses that we serve or will be serving, they need help with just understanding the application process, just something as simple as that. And there are other obstacles that I thought were just so unfair. If you did not have a lending relationship, had a loan at a particular bank, then that bank may not be so willing to help you apply for funding. Who's ever heard of something like that? If it's a federal program and you have been trained in it and you have a loan department in your bank, this is the community you serve. You serve all of the business owners in that community. So there was the picking and choosing and, you don't have a loan here. Splitting hairs is what I like to call it. We don't have time for that. If these funds were indeed created to meet the needs of these most vulnerable businesses, then they should have received it. And I'm afraid it's going to be very telling when we see the results, when we see the ratio of who actually received the COVID relief funding. I don't pretend to be a prophet, but I can tell you it's going to be bad. It's going to be very telling. And I hope that we are able to, so where am I now? I'd like to help these businesses to prepare. What if we have a second wave? What can we do now to prepare for that? Another thing that I found out was many of these applications, they didn't care about your DUNS number. They didn't care about your business credit profile. They used your personal credit. And unfortunately, for many of our business owners, we know what it is. And so that disqualified so many from receiving the funding. So now it's time for Axiom and other organizations like us to say, let's run you through this training. Let's take some time and let's look over this credit and let's see what we can do here. And let's create the projections and let's make sure you understand that financial literacy piece. That's the only way they're going to make it. And so that's what we're committed to doing going forward. It's now about preparing them.
Okay.
Is inevitable.
Yeah, so that was exactly what I was, and it's so funny because you keep answering the questions I'm going to ask you. So listen, keep going. But that was definitely getting ready to be one of the questions I was going to ask, for you and Daniel, are how are you all going to change your practices moving forward? Not just even with COVID, because we saw that that's exposed a lot of things, but just in, again, ensuring people have equal opportunity, ensuring people have the ability to be successful just like the next man, woman, etc. how are you all planning to, so you mentioned a couple of things, but just even maybe thinking a little bit deeper, how are you going to change your business practices, again, thinking outward, innovatively? What does that look like? Or what do you think it should look like? It may not be what you're able to implement right in the next month or so, but what do you feel like it needs to look like?
So for Axiom, I see that in order to level the playing field, I have to spend a lot more time consulting with the business owners. I have to spend time. The hand-holding cannot just be a great term, literally.
So you're like saying there has to be even a step zero, right?
Absolutely.
Like we got to get business owners and folks prepared to even start the process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're saying, you know what, and we this with our first applicant, we have a list because every business owner does this. Okay, I put this process in place, and this is how we're going to do it, and that's how we're going to get it done. But the reality is that we had this checklist of documents that we needed in order for the loan package to be reviewed. And we noticed that one of those documents sent our applicant in a tailspin.
Yeah.
They didn't know what it was. They didn't know how they could get it created. And so what we're now doing is saying, let's check this list. What do you have on this list? And whatever you don't have, I'm rolling up my sleeves. The loan officer is rolling up their sleeves, and we're going to work on this together. We're going to get that budget together. We're going to have a forecast together for you, and, so that they can understand, where am I? Where do I go, and how do I get there? How much am I going to need in order to get there? So it really is that one-on-one time. And another thing that I've learned is in this season, and it's applicable for every season, but you have to lead with compassion. You have to care about them, not just the business, not just, this will be another client, this will be another customer, and then we can report that we are now at customer 50. No, absolutely not. You have to care. That's a family. When you build these businesses, the community prospers.
That's right.
And you have to look at that holistic picture. And so I no longer approach a customer with, you don't know that? Right. No, absolutely not.
You cannot assume, listen, because you can't do that. Yeah.
You can't, because everyone's experience is different. Everyone, and then too, we have to create this atmosphere, this partnership.
Yeah. Hey, that's what it is, though.
We have to create this partnership so that it's not just Axiom, because our focus is on providing capital to these businesses. And yes, there is some technical assistance there. However, there are other organizations which exist to do this. The University of Pittsburgh's SBDC, Duquesne University's SBDC. I mean, so many other organizations that if we partner with them, we can increase our capacity. We can reach even more.
Right.
Thanks, Daniel.
Yeah, no, like I said, you and I could go back and forth and talk about this forever. Yeah, so I mean, I'll I'm writing notes here. See if I can understand what I wrote. So as far as, like I said, Michelle, you're kind of covering the for-profit and the Axiom side. I can try to get kind of the nonprofit side. I know I'm just one blip of the nonprofit side, but yeah. So I mean, as far as me personally, with kind of how I would operate, what I'm doing, one of the things that I've seen it before, I've heard it on calls, all of the above, where one of the things I like to say is, it's like, well, there's a difference between when you say, like, the community, the community is at the table. Like, there's a huge difference between the community being in the same room and at the table. And a lot of times those meetings,
come on.
Yeah. A lot of times those meetings where the community is there, they're just in the room.
Listen.
And I'm like, that, it's like, well, do you actually want input?
Not the same thing.
Move, like, get out of your seat. Let the 70-year-old grandmother who's lived in whatever neighborhood, let her talk. You shouldn't even have to say anything, but just let her be there. Like, it's not just and then that's another thing on top of that too, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself, is not just, not just stopping at that seat either, but it's making room for that voice.
Yes.
You have people who turn around and say, well, you got, half the people here are board members, the other half of the table are community. And then they don't get a chance to talk at all the entire hour, 2-hour meeting, whatever it is. And It's like, you're kind of missing the point there entirely.
Yes.
So one of the things that I like to do, at the risk of using more cliche phrases and such, is, like I said earlier, about leveraging the privilege. So what I tell people, I like to leverage my privilege to get my foot in the door.
Yeah. So
they see me and they go, okay, what does this guy have to say? And then I push the door open and let my clients walk in first. So it's kind of this fun.
You pull what we call a okey doke.
A switcheroo, whatever. Yeah. I'm like, I love doing it. Usually it's not literally, a door, of course, but I love doing that because they're like, oh, you have this idea. I'm like, yeah, sure. Let me talk to the people that thought of it.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's like, no, I'm the messenger, and I'm totally okay in that role, because at the end of the day, I'm going to be helping them figure it out and implement it, hopefully.
Yeah.
So I kind of love doing that. There are some people in email responses you get that you can tell they were like, oh, okay, like they're thrown off by it, and I shouldn't enjoy that, but I do. But no, as far as kind of like that, kind of the second part of what you asked about, like the kind of in an ideal world, if there were a bunch of me's, one of the things that I had the opportunity to do earlier this year, again, it feels like last year, but earlier this year, I was one of the technical assistance providers for Neighborhood Allies. They have their Love My Neighbor mini grant. Okay. And I got to do that, and I was helping out in Homewood, the Hill District, and Wilkinsburg. And that experience in itself was like a completely different side of nonprofits and grant writing and all of that I really hadn't had before, because in this case, it's like, no, like, I'm used to writing grants for organizations, not necessarily individuals. Whereas this was like, hey, I have a workshop I'm going to sit in the Carnegie Library in Hill District for 6 hours. Show up, don't show up. If you want to show up and say hi and talk the whole time and not do anything with your grant, okay. Like, I wouldn't recommend that, but you can. Like, it's, and so just kind of being on the ground and really working with people to the point where, I'm giving out, they said don't do it, but I was like, it seems weird not to. Right. Giving out people my cell phone, giving people my number and say, text me. Don't call me first, probably pretend it's a quick text or something. But if you have a question about something, like, here's how you get a hold of me. Mm-hmm. And so I think that kind of model from that nonprofit perspective, that kind of model, but from actually not from the nonprofits themselves, but from the philanthropic world. Maybe not so the banks. I know that's a whole complicated thing. But as far as the foundations, one of the things I like to do is, of course, I'm always going through the guidelines for all the different grant programs, because that's literally part of my job, making sure things are eligible. And one of the things that I like to ask questions to different program officers. And one of the things I've noticed, and I've told Michelle before too, is that a common example you hear is, to be eligible, you need to be a nonprofit, a 501c3 registered with the state of Pennsylvania or wherever. And like, I'd say 8 out of 10 times, that's not true. You can also have a fiscal sponsor, but that's, again, like what Michelle was saying, like, that's that education gap that's just not there. And I was on a call with someone from a foundation the one time, a program officer, and I asked about that question for the one client, and they were like, oh no, you don't need to do that. And I literally was like, why is that not in your frequently asked questions then? Why is that not in your application? I said, that piece right there, that exchange that we just had is very human. that is what's missing completely from this application.
Yeah.
And I also check with them too, usually, is like, have you done the application yourself? Most of the times they've not. And I'm like, okay, I understand that your role is not to apply. I get that. But if you're the one who's deciding who gets funded and you're looking based on only who submits, you're missing a whole demographic that is, for whatever reason, they couldn't print something out. They didn't have internet access. They missed the deadline because, I don't know, they don't have a laptop or whatever the situation is. It's like you're missing out on entire demographics that need this probably the most. Again, I'm biased with my own clients, but those, the groups like that, it's like they are the groups that don't have access. They don't know how grants work. And it's like, well, if you don't make that effort to provide a little bit of technical assistance, unless you reach out to them, they won't bother you. And it's just kind of this weird, like, well, it's like, well, do you really expect the foundation and philanthropic, accessibility, do you expect that to change by doing nothing?
Right.
It's like the only reason that some of the grants have been either applied for or awarded in some cases with some of my clients is because I happen to know a program officer. And so I'm the one, introducing what they do and say, hey, would you guys be interested in funding this? And whoever says, yeah, sure. And then I make that introduction, open the door for them and say, here,
okay,
your show. And so bigger picture, it's like more advocacy for that accessibility part and transparency in general. The transparency part is more so, if you get a no from your whatever grant application, don't just send no. Send no, and you can have a bunch of templates that are reasons why, the typical, we're out of funding, or, you're not a 501c3 or whatever it is. You can have templates, but the idea is that everyone should get some response back.
Right.
Because then you don't know what you did wrong. You have no idea. And there are some foundations, and this isn't to knock every foundation. There are some that are much better and more accessible than others. And the ones that are accessible will say, if you have any questions, please reach out. And then a program officer will talk to you. And it's like, that should be the norm. That shouldn't be a rare exception. It's like, no, you shouldn't have to know someone at the foundation to get that,
Right.
So in a perfect world, more advocacy.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Michelle?
I agree with the advocacy piece, and I would say that was one of the most compelling reasons why I started. Little fun fact about CDFIs, they exist to serve underserved communities. Bottom line. No other purpose for them.
They're that weird mix between a bank and a foundation where they're like, well, we're a kind of a small bank, but in your back, like right there with you, right on the ground.
Literally. And we also should not operate like a commercial bank. And we are supposed to be focused on helping those small businesses in that community.
Right.
We want the mom and pop stores to pop up and make it and be there 20 years later. They're still there. And the CDFI is what makes it happen. And what the Black community sometimes they don't understand is that they need you to apply.
Yeah.
Have reporting requirements.
Yeah.
Where they have to show that they have served this certain demographic. But we don't know. We don't know that these CDFIs exist for us. There's nobody whispering in our network saying, you know what, you're trying to expand. You need one more barber chair for your barber shop. Right. This is where you go. And oftentimes, and I have name dropped on purpose, but I remember one applicant came in and I was so proud of him for what he wanted to do. It was a great business idea. The technical part of it, do you have a business plan? Unfortunately, you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean that your business idea is trash.
Right.
And so he came in and he had handwritten what he felt like his goal was, and he pulled it out of his pocket, and it's a wrinkled, crumpled up paper. This guy like works with his hands, like he's, and he's not white collar. He came in and he's like, this is okay here, this is what I want to do. And when you see an applicant like that, you should know automatically, I can't send him to the university's SBDC.
No.
There has to be that point, that initial, like I have to prepare him. I have to define things. I have to introduce him to things.
Right.
I watched this happen repeatedly. They would come in, have no knowledge of what you're talking about, but then you send them into the university setting, it's even worse. And then guess what happens? They give up.
Correct.
I just want to add in real quick. So two quick points. You mentioned about like that, or I guess earlier in the call, you mentioned about how, you don't want to say, well, wait, you didn't know that already?
Right.
So realistically, and I might have given you the answer at first, Michelle, just to be a pain. But when I talk to people when I first, they're like, oh, what kind of grants are out there? And like, the first thought in my head is, well, let me Google that. It's like, that's rude, but also it's like, it's the reality that is there. And it's just like, there's just enough of that disconnect where grants are like this whole, I don't know, this whole mythical thing. And you're like, no.
Worldly. It's like a concept out in,
no, quick Google search and you can find 30 foundations in Pittsburgh or whatever. I'm sure it's more. So I wanted to add that there. And then what you were saying there at the end of what you're just saying, kind of along that same line. One of my first clients that I had, officially for myself, I think what it was. They were putting together a program description, and they wanted to apply to something, and it was just required a letter of intent, which is a project description, a very basic, high level. What do you want to do? How much does it cost? And they had sent me a few documents. It was like 6 or 7 Word documents and some scanned PDFs, and they had asked me, well, can you work on this letter of intent? And I was like, yeah, sure. And so I opened up, and they said, here, use this one Word document. This is where I've been typing up most of my ideas about this thing. If you can pull anything, it'll be from there. I was like, great. So I looked in, and it was, no exaggeration, it was just like sentences everywhere. There was no rule, there was no rhythm, no rhyme, nothing. It was just words and thoughts. And I'm like, okay, I can work with this. Like, your thoughts are here. It's just not in a coherent plan. And so what I did was I went through, it was like 2 pages of just stuff just kind of thrown into this document. And I took this and I made, I put their little logo and everything, the header, footer, nice little thing, worded this, made the program description. And then we had a quick phone call to go through like a budget and kind of get a very, again, high level budget. And so it ended up being, it was a 2-page one-pager. It was a 1-page document that said, here's what we do, here's what we want to do, and here's why we are, why we're even eligible to say we should do this, why we have any credibility, and then a 1-page budget. So it was a 3-page document. I sent it back to them. And, on the phone, I was talking with the woman who was in charge of this nonprofit, and she was just like, oh my gosh, you would never have, did you write all that? I'm like, no, you did. Mm-hmm. I'm like, you wrote this. I said,
but it's arranging.
I'm like, but you said all you had to do was arrange it. I'm like,
yes.
Most of this stuff, none of this is new. You had this. I was like, it's just a matter of putting it in, like just kind of putting it together. And she was just like, I don't think I could do that. I'm like, you can. I was like, you did, it just wasn't in this format. I said, all I did was rearrange and, add a few words to make a little more sense in the sentences. I said, but the bulk of this, you wrote it. And so
it's so simple. It's providing guidance. It's empowering people and letting them know you actually know what you're doing. You do.
It might not feel like it, but you do.
Exactly.
Yes, but let's package it this way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I've said before too, I probably actually said this to you back in January, Michelle. You know, I'm like, my end goal is to lose clients. Like, I know it's not sustainable, but my end goal is to lose clients because they can write grants on their own, or I've written, you know, maybe 4 or 5 or more, who knows, and they now understand you don't need to create new every single time. And you can use some of the same language, you just tweak it accordingly.
Right.
But that's knowledge. That's knowledge.
Yeah, I'm like,
passing on.
You know, I'm trying to pass this on to them. It's like, hey, you know,
Yeah.
you have everything here. It's just, you just might have the time, you know, or the capacity to throw this into a format. But once I'm like, here, use this thing, here's your boilerplate. You can do this.
Absolutely.
If I lose clients, that means I've done something right.
Yeah.
I agree with that, because that is where we are. Axiom should be that first step. When you leave Axiom,
You're good to go. You're ready.
reported on those payments, you can walk into any bank and get a loan, because credit is like that, because you understand the financial literacy piece. It's grown because you've been an Axiom client.
And when the banks are, when those banks for loans are impressed by the clients that go through, just for the record, we do accept contributions to Axiom.
That's just another shameless plug as we upload this.
Shameless plug. I love it.
No, it's been amazing talking to the both of you tonight. You shared a wealth of knowledge. You both are a well when it comes to small businesses and getting them off the ground, profit, nonprofit. And key things I definitely heard out of Axiom Advancement Corp tonight is, you know, guidance, advocacy, resources, consulting, a partnership is what you're able to offer these businesses that are up and coming. So tell everybody how they can get in contact with you, Michelle, and your business.
Absolutely. So the best way to find out more about us is at www.axiompgh.com. And that is spelled AXIOMPGH.com. Our phone number is 412-482-3342. Is that correct, Daniel?
I know. I'm following along.
Better be.
Well, here's the thing. To be fair, we literally just had a phone number change. So my apologies. Let me just make sure.
That's hilarious, because you're going to be having people calling Domino's. I'm trying to start a business. Do you want pizza or a sub? That's all we got for you tonight.
No.
412.
Yes, I was correct.
3342.
Got it. And I will include that in the description when I post. And it's been amazing talking to the both of you. You've offered so much for businesses and practical steps forward too, for your own business and for other businesses. So I do love how you even called that out, that let's work together. Let's show a pathway forward for small businesses, profit and nonprofit. And thank you very much again, Michelle and Daniel, for joining us today. I want everybody to also look for On Purpose Planning and Consulting on Facebook, Instagram, and right here on YouTube by liking, subscribing, and hitting that notification button, that bell, because you want to be informed when there is a new episode. So remember everybody, On Purpose Coaching, where we challenge you to do better on purpose. Thank you.